Hello, everyone. You're listening to Random Sage with Maryann from Revealing Light. Thank you for joining me today. I've actually had a week off. I had family visiting, or my sister visiting, and we tripped all around the countryside and had a wonderful time. And it was a really nice break for me to be away from politics, from being away, from trying to interpret the chaos that's surrounding us. It's pretty heavy here at the moment in many ways in Australia and also across the globe. Many of you have heard of Israel declaring an alert for war, a state of readiness for a war, now referring to it as a war with Palestine after Hamas, the Palestinian organization, missile bombed Israel. They've taken citizens and soldiers hostage. This comes at a time when the current leader of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been moving more and more toward authoritarian rule. It comes at a time when Palestinians, indeed a journalist was murdered trying to cover some time ago, trying to cover the conflicts, the ongoing conflicts between Israelis and Palestinians. We've seen a march toward Israel moving into that West Bank and really wanting to, I think Israel, or the hardliners, the far right in Israel, would be quite happy to really wipe out the Palestinians. Now, Palestinians have had enough, and they've launched their own attacks. I mean, it's difficult to say. Again, this is such a long-standing, long-running conflict. It's hard to really ascertain who's in the right or who's in the wrong, or perhaps who was in the right some time ago, who was in the wrong. Maybe that's changed a little bit now. Maybe we have. Well, we do know that there's no peace, and that's a good starting point. So we have that very worrying conflict in the Middle East emerging now. In America, we have the major opposition party to the Democrats, the Republicans, unable to govern in their parliament, in their House of Representatives. And that is serious, not just for the USA, but for the rest of the world, if their democracy isn't workable. We have also in Australia something that touches me personally. We have the Voice referendum coming up on October the 14th to make a constitutional change to give Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders a voice to Parliament, to create, to recognise them as First Peoples of Australia, First Nations of Australia, and then to establish a body called a Voice, which would then advise or give advice to not only our Parliament, but also our executive government, our public service, our government departments. So this was designed to provide Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders with a voice that could be listened to, with constitutional power at the base of that. I have really looked at, I've looked at the Voice intuitively, psychically over most of the last year. I've done 2-3 readings on it in my other channel, Revealing Light, astrology, tarot, and spirituality. Every time I look at it, I come out with a no. I still have a feeling that it will be a no. What this is highlighted, what the Voice in Australia has highlighted, similar to the war between the Republicans and the Democrats in the US, and even, can I say, the Israeli and the Palestinian long-running conflict. One way or another, it's a conflict. It's a polarization to the point where there has to be some kind of, I guess, I'm not going to say fighting it out, literally, with Israel and Palestine. In America, very much a battle to try and stabilize and save their democracy. And in Australia, unfortunately, it has been, we've seen two extremes. The worst in my mind has been the racism that has emerged in Australia, and then also at the other end of the spectrum is those who cannot listen to anyone who does not agree with the yes side, and being branded as racist as well. We've seen some very hurtful, on the no side of the camp, very hurtful rhetoric, and particularly on social media, that if I was an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, I would be deeply, deeply hurt. And I certainly wouldn't be trusting any Australians or a part of Australia, a segment of Australia, that brings forward this racism. So from where I stand, there are three sides to the Australia voice. It is the extremists in the no camp who will publish racist tropes, misinformation, all the things that we associate with Trumpism in America, the MAGA movement in America, this deliberate sowing of misinformation, scare tactics, trying to race bait. Then we have on the other side those in the yes camp who will not listen to any of the moderate arguments about why this may not be the right time or the right set of circumstances to proceed with this. And so they accuse those in the middle or in the logical type of camp of being racist as well. So we've got these two extremes, and unfortunately, the way that the voice referendum has been set up in Australia, there's no room for this middle lane, for this dialogue about why it may not be the right time to bring this voice referendum forward, or even in its right form. So obviously, what's likely to happen, there's a whole segment of Australia that's undecided. What's likely to happen is they're likely to vote no, because they haven't been listened to. There hasn't been a forum where they can be listened to. Normally, we would have had constitutional conventions in the lead up to such a major constitutional change, but there hasn't been any of those. And so, it really is going to be a predictable result, unless a miracle happens and the voice does get up. But at this stage, I'm thinking that it can't. And it is just another example, along with what is occurring in America, that and even that we failed to solve, despite billions of dollars given to Israel and aid to Palestine. We have not been able to solve that either. So I'm seeing now a split, whether I go to Hungary, the Viktor Orban, an extreme right leader, whether I go to Vladimir Putin, an authoritarian in Russia, whether I go to what is occurring in France with Emmanuel Macron and the riots there against minorities rising up in violence against the French government. Wherever I go, Italy, a far-right candidate was elected in a coalition. A lot of the times, neither the left nor the right can govern, or the far right and the left can govern in their own right. They have to form coalitions. And it's interesting when I look to America and I see that maybe the only way forward for their House of Congress is to form some sort of bipartisan approach to get America through until the next election in 2024. The polarization has been so extreme, and I know about it because I look at it every day through the lens of a journalist, through the lens of a researcher, and through the lens of an intuitive, clairvoyant, a psychic. I can sense where things are heading. The polarization has really been there to show ourselves. We are showing who we are. And the advent of social media and the internet has really allowed this to, or our basis selves, particularly the trolling, to come, and the misinformation to come to the surface. And I don't know that anybody has an answer to solve that right at this moment. Democracy, where are we with democracy? Imagine two warring factions. What's likely to happen? Well, you're never going to get civility, are you? You're never going to get that order. You're going to get civil unrest. You're going to get a one side or another trying to usurp power, to bend and sometimes break the rules, to get around the rules, to usurp the power. And really, it's, the strongest wins the battle for that power. That is actually the antithesis of democracy, because democracy is designed to give the public a say, whether that's through public consultation, public organisation. Unions, for example, is an example of organised collective bargaining, organisation to really improve conditions for the workers. Here in Australia, we have public holidays, we have an award wage, we have penalty rates, although they are being phased out by successive Conservative governments. We've fought hard for a 5-day week, a 38-hour week. So that's an example of how a democracy can help the evolution for all. We have protests in the US. We've had multiple marches over the last 5-6 years protesting. And of course, we have our right to vote. All these things. Now, I'm not going to say democracy creates equality, because it doesn't, because you overlay a capitalist system over that. And I mean, I don't want to get into that either. It just suffice to say, it makes it more complicated. But democracy is supposed to at least work for us all, to at least deliver us the freedom to have our vote, our freedom to be heard. The far right is a symptom of systems that have failed, systems that have disenfranchised a whole section of. You can't, as much as you want to wish the far right away, you won't be able to. They are there. They have become more extreme for a reason. And some of that is, I don't want to be forced into agreeing with you. I don't believe, I'm talking them, I actually do believe, but I'm putting myself in their shoes. Someone saying, I don't believe in gender, I don't know, transforming, changing your gender. I don't believe that in gay marriage even. I don't, I'm just going through some of the things that a section of the community doesn't really want to be forced into believing. We can't force people into thinking the same way that we do. And the far left can be one-eyed and maybe accuse that person that doesn't believe in gay marriage, but is just sitting in their living room, just not really wanting to, not to have to change their belief, but they're not expressing bigotry in that way. They just do not believe in it. The far left can be one-eyed. You must believe in what I believe in. But we are not all extremists. There's a good section of the electorate, of the voters, who can see glimmers of understanding, want to open up a dialogue. They're trying to reach some sort of consensus. And that, I'm going to say, that's a silent majority now. Because if we were able to sit down in the tent, bring the two warring factions together, and say, well, what you're doing is it's just not going to work. We won't be able to sustain this civilization. And to you on the far left, maybe you need to give some ground a little bit. Not everybody is going to hold the beliefs as passionately as what you do. They are both symptoms of the need for democracy, yet democracy, dialogue, mediation, reaching consensus, even some trade-offs, even some negotiations. That's all part of reaching a consensus. But the far right and the far left are a symptom that the silent majority who do believe in democracy are not being heard. In voting systems that haven't been corrupted, the silent majority will be heard. I often have seen where people underestimate a smart electorate, that silent majority. And I think that this majority is smart enough to realise that moving away from extremism is the answer. I believe that the silent majority will be heard, even in places like America, where their democracy or their systems are so polarised. Because we've all seen democracies fail, an authoritarian rule emerging, and no one wants that. So can the silent majority emerge? Can we have evolution of what I would call a moderate approach that enables the extreme right, for example, to be stamped out? Because the extreme right are the usurpers, or trying to usurp power. I believe that moderate governments are in power, even in the UK, Canada, Australia, the US. These are moderate governments. So let's see if that's enough. Is it enough? And why are we engaged in this battle against extremism now? I guess from a metaphysical, universal point of view, again, what I do is try and make sense out of the chaos. So let's ask that question. Why is the battle being waged against extremism, whether it's right, left? Why are we waging that battle now? Why are we waging the battle against extremism now in all its vulgarness, in all its unpleasantness? Extremism of any sort doesn't even have to have a side. And maybe that's the thing, we're dividing them into two camps, when in actual fact, it is just plain extremism that does not work. And maybe if we started speaking in that language, maybe people would start to hear us a little bit more. So let's change our language. Let's say extremism. Why are we fighting the battle of extremism now? Why are we fighting the battle of extremism now? We have the Ace of Cups emerging. That's a new emotional start. And I think if you've listened to this podcast thus far, you will see a revelation that emerged when I talked about right and left, and rather rephrasing it to extremism. The Lovers. Okay, so it's about our relationships. It's about, at the very granular level, it's about how we relate to one another now. as much as anything else. How do we relate? Social media has taken that to a whole new level. How we relate to one another now. The Tower card, unfortunately, structures, the world is so volatile at the moment. We have, as I said, Israel, Palestine. We have Russia invading Ukraine and everything that has wrought. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands have died already in Russia and Ukraine. Russians and Ukrainians, innocent lives in Ukraine. What's going to be the result of the Israel-Palestinian conflict? Death. Unfortunately, what happens in America every other day? Gun violence. The Tower. What will happen on October the 15th in Australia post the Voice referendum? We will have to deal with the racism that emerged during this campaign, referendum campaign. We will have to acknowledge just how far people were pushed. And we will have to acknowledge the role, and I hope acknowledge the role that social media has played in all of this. We have a whole different set of laws to the US. And we have very, very strong anti-discrimination laws. Perhaps a government might look very closely at our social media and finally tackle the extremism that it ferments. The Tower card. In the past, we have the truth emerging. I said at the beginning of this podcast that what this extremism, polarization, does is it shows us who we are. And when we get shown that, we have to deal with it. The Page of Swords, illumination, clarity around our communication. These are communication cards. I'll do a fuller reading and a look at the astrology on my other channel, Revealing Light of the Voice, and you'll see why a lot of this is around the way we communicate. We have loss and people being locked out of, whether that is out of a system like extreme oligarchy, which is capitalism in extreme, becomes oligarchy. We have that emerging. We have different beliefs. We have a democracy that is not engaging enough with the people. We have the 10 of Cups, love, peace, families, disappointment. Again, that silent majority who really see the simplicity of all of this. Talk it out, find a consensus, do some trade-offs. You've got something I want, I've got something you want. Let's do a trade. Let's find a way forward. And the 3 of Rods in the hopes and fears. Have we done enough to strengthen our democracies? Have we been complacent? What did we let slide in the last couple of decades? And we have the Queen of Rods as the outcome. I believe that we're going to start to tackle these really, really difficult issues slowly but surely. And I feel that the Tower card here brings us into the same tent through misfortune, through the ugly truth emerging, through the need to reconcile post-voice referendum, to try and find a way through. We're going to have to talk. We're going to have to recommit to moving forward. We're going to have to tackle tackle the isolation. We're going to have to do the review. We're going to have to Do that very, very, very deep introspection. And we're going to have to come together for the good of all. There are structures, there are things that are changing. It may not be in the way that you want or expect, but the old ways they're gone now. The toxicity has reached, the devil card is at the base of the pack, along with the tower in the foundation. We've reached such a level of toxicity in our democracies that we no longer come together. And the wheel of fortune is changing, and we are emerging into a new. And that is inevitable. That is inevitable when you cannot solve, when you don't even want to solve the extremism. You don't even want to tackle the obvious misinformation on social media, where you allow threats against the judiciary and witnesses, as we're seeing in the US now with the former president threatening and trying to intimidate witnesses, describing judges as racist and in need of, disbarring and recusing and threatening witnesses, saying they deserve the death penalty. This kind of extremism, it can only go one way, and I've told you this. It feels like I'm having a chat at the kitchen table. I told you this. I have. It's been revealed in multiple readings over many, many years that there's only one way this will go, and that is the silent majority will seize the reins for us all. But first, we have that tower moment. My thoughts go out to everybody who is polarized in any way, and polarized to the level that you've become extreme, because that is not a good place to be in. It's unhealthy. It doesn't make for a good well-being. And so I would say just let go of it, and see if you can find a way forward to have your voice heard, where it does not result in violence or violent thoughts or intimidating or bullying thoughts against anyone. Find a way forward that allows others a place at the table so you can work it out, so you can talk in a measured way without the emotion, and find a new level of maturity, of emotional maturity, and try and work through this. I think that's where this is heading, everyone. I think it's going to head in a direction where the silent majority will have to stand up and be counted. All right, that's the podcast for today. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll be back again next week with another edition, and we'll be broadcasting all the way up to Christmas, and then we'll take a nice hiatus during January, and re-emerge in February with this ongoing podcast, Random Sage. I do have some exciting news to you. I've finished my Revealing Light Cancer Journey, Spiritual Awakening Journey book, and I'm going through the motions of having that very, very closely edited before publishing. I have also started a new book called The Little Book of Random Sage with Maryann from Revealing Light, and that will be a book that is part channeling, part reflection, part grimoire. You'll have some of my intentions, mantras that I use, some of my clearing protection methods that I use. Wherever you choose to open that book up, we'll have something for everybody there. So anyway, stay tuned for that, for the Random Sage book. And I'll catch up with you again soon. Bye for now.